I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 13 of Caropop. Our guest this week produced some of the 1960s most energetic British invasion records, Shel Talmy. He was behind the boards for all of those Kinks hits from You Really Got Me and All Day and All of the Night through Sunny Afternoon, and such classic albums as Face to Face and Something Else by the Kinks. He also produced The Who's My Generation album and its title single, and songs such as The Kids Are All Right, the Easybeats' frenetic, irresistible hit Friday on My Mind, and songs by the band that he thought would be as big as the Kinks, The Creation. They didn't break through then, but Creation songs such as Making Time have become staples of films, notably Rushmore, as well as commercials, and Shel Talmy is still awed by Eddie Phillips's innovative guitar playing. Talmy also recalls working with another artist who would go on to greater success in later years, David Bowie. Now 84 years old, Shel Talmy lives in Los Angeles and has tales to tell about how he bluffed his way to England in the early 1960s and wound up producing some of the era's most enduring music. He describes his recording techniques, such as setting up 12 microphones for one drum kit, and his use of session musicians. These include Jimmy Page, who played rhythm guitar, but not the lead on You Really Got Me, and the ever-present keyboardist Nicky Hopkins. Shel Talmy is not shy about touting his role in sculpting these bands' trademark sounds, how he recognized which songs would be hits, and how he arranged and produced them in ways that got them on the radio. He also has some axes to grind in names as he details his fallouts with, among others, The Who's and the Easybeats management. In the late 60s and beyond, the music business and Talmy's success rate changed, and we hear about that too. Shel Talmy has a lot of memories, and he's happy to share them, and I was happy to hear them. I know you will be too. Please enjoy the Caropop conversation with Shel Talmy. You were born in Chicago, which is where I'm talking to you from.
Right.
How long did you live here, and where were you in Chicago?
I was on the northwest side. You know where Humboldt Park is?
Absolutely.
Okay. I lived right next door to Humboldt Park. And I was moved out here when I was about 15 and a half. My mother in particular really wanted to move out here.
So you're in LA now. You moved out there when you were 15
I got moved out. I was about 15 and a half, I think. And I went to Fairfax High out here, which is the de facto music school. Lots of music people came out of Fairfax for whatever reason, and I of course I went when I went to London. I was there for 17 years, so that was my other major residence, and now back here and happy to be back here.
Were you a music person when you arrived in LA at 15 and a half?
I liked music a lot, and I listened to a lot of music in Chicago in the radio stations. And same thing when I came out here, I listened to all the music there was. And I remember in Chicago there was a weekly sort of crummy little magazine done on really rough paper that had printed all the lyrics of whatever the new songs were. I used to buy it every week, and I probably know lyrics to hundreds of songs.
So, like, what were the first songs or records that you fell in love with?
The first records that really got me into R&B and stuff like that was G by the Crows, and once I heard that, I thought, this is really terrific, and I started listening to other stuff and went out and bought records by some of the old blues guys and things like that, and just got into the whole deal. I love American songbook stuff. I obviously grew up with it, and I pretty much like all the various genres. I have pretty much produced every genre, strangely enough, except for country, which I like a lot. And someday I'd like to do some country stuff. Would be fun.
When you moved out to England, how old were you?
I was 23, I believe. Yeah, 23.
And were you thinking at that point that you wanted to find like British rock bands to produce, or was it not a specific?
No, it's totally the opposite. the studio I was working for was Conway out here. It was owned by an English guy. Kept telling me how great London was. So I went to London for quote unquote 5 weeks. That was the trip I wanted to make to Europe before it passed me by, and I was going to see London, go to Paris, and stuff like that. And what happened was that I thought, since I didn't have a whole lot of bread, that if I could work there for a couple of weeks and earn some money, that would be great. And my friend Nick Benet, who was Capitol Records A&R, I told him that's where I'm going, and I'd like to find some way to make some bread. And he said, here, take a couple of my acetates I just finished and tell me you produced them. I said, okay, great, I will. And which I did. And the 2 he gave me were Lou Rawls' Music in the Air and Surfing Safari by the Beach Boys. And when I played it to Dick Rowe at Decca, he says, you start today. So by the time they found out it was all BS, I already had a hit. So I never mentioned it. So.
and this was 1962?
Yeah, 2.
Okay. So you've done a lot of fantastic music, and lately you've been writing these reminiscences and on Facebook where you really get down into the recording of these songs. And it's been such a treat to read those as well.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. When I first started this thing, about 1.5 years ago, I think now, that I thought there will be some interest in what I'm doing, and it's caught on. I got thousands of readers a week now, which is really nice. So I'm continuing to grind them out.
Is this a memoir in the process, or are you just doing this?
I have been asked literally hundreds of times to put what I've been writing so far into a book, and I'm having trouble finding a publisher. So I put the word out, and I'm still looking.
The publishing business is not great right now, but
No,
they should, because these are fantastic stories. And yeah. I know there's all this prejudice against, oh, well, it's a music book, therefore blah, 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 blah.
Well, this actually is in some ways totally different from a music book, in that it's a book full of vignettes covering the entire subject. So I would have thought it'll have its own. Well, I mean, hell, I got built-in sales with the people who are on Facebook. So
absolutely.
But I just can't find a damn publisher at this point. I'm continuing to look.
All right. Well, we'll get the word out. Anyone who's listening to this podcast should be, signing, cool. getting this represented and getting it sold to a publisher by now. Right. What was it that inspired you to start writing these?
Probably the pandemic, I think, is more that's the best answer. Sessions dried up, and I thought, hell, I could do something here with my time. So, and I've been thinking about doing it for a while anyhow. So it just all came together, and I started doing it.
People who are listening, you should get on to Shel Talmy's Facebook page, because they're really fantastic.
Great, thank you.
Reminiscences, and part of what's cool about them is it sort of lets you know and reminds us sort of what a producer did, because producer can mean so many different things, and it means something different now, I think, from what it meant then. And the idea of the rock producer, when you started, there weren't that many rock producers because there weren't that many rock records at that point. So
that's true. Yeah.
Did you have like a model you were following, or did you just sort of figure this out as you went along?
No, I just figured it out. There's no model to follow. I mean, when I first started as a recording engineer, that everybody was breaking new ground. That's why I experimented with miking drums with 12 mics and doing isolation of instruments and all that kind of stuff. Nobody was really doing.
Right.
So, and it's certainly helped me throughout.
Yeah, you're famous for the 12 mics on the drums. Would you say that's your sort of greatest studio innovation, or is there something else that you feel like had bigger lasting impact?
It's certainly the most well known. I've done a bunch of other things of how to capture overtones and isolation of instruments, and also a few things that I worked out how to do with mixes and things like that. But I still try to find other ways to do things, because with digital now, in many ways, things are way easier than they used to be. And there's certainly more flexibility than there ever was. So I continue on doing all that.
The limitations you had back then probably forced you to have a certain level of resourcefulness that maybe people recording music don't need now, because they could push a button and get the sound they want. Whereas back then you were sort of discovering things and having the happy accidents and, figuring out how to, make the most out of 3 tracks or something like that.
Well, I just covered it, funnily enough, in the last couple of 3 vignettes that I've written in that 3-track, working with 3-track was you have to really sit down and work out how you're going to get everything together and all the tracks together and go 3-track to 3-track, so you wind up with a decent finished product. It took a lot more time and a lot more planning than digital does, which of course is easy as hell. I mean, you can get as many tracks as you like to work, and you're not embracing anything if you don't need to, and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, also every app known to man is now available on digital, and so you can get practically any sound that you want to get. And digital now, of course, in my opinion, has come about as close as it can do to what analog sounds like, including the warmth. And so I'm pleased using digital. It's a lot easier.
How much of your job was sort of being you wore so many hats, and one of them was sort of being a talent scout / A&R, you would call it later. How much of it was that as opposed to engineering, arranging?
Well, when I went there, first of all, I brought the 12 mic thing with me, and as usual, as I was told in LA, you can't do this because the mics will phase and all that kind of stuff. And I said, I guess you just have to sit and listen. And and a month later, everybody's trying to use 12 mics. So, so that was the first thing I brought with me when they gave me the first artist that I did, and. From there, as a talent scout, I was always looking for new artists and good artists to do, and they asked me to bring them in to Decca and see what you think. So also the other thing I should say is that part of the deal I told Dick Rowe was that I am an independent producer, meaning I get royalties because nobody in England was getting royalties at the time. So he went for that because he was pro-American. And so anyway, I brought in both Manfred Mann and Georgie Fame, thinking we're going to love these bands. They're 2 really good bands. They turned them both down. I thought to myself, this is time for me to become independent. And that's when the next opportunity came up, which was the Kinks. I took them in the pie.
Yeah, Decca was having some historic swings and misses around that time.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
So that was a reference to the Beatles also, for all those of you who didn't pick up on it.
And Dick Rowe's defense, he did not turn down the Beatles. He gave it to his senior A&R guy, who was Mike Smith, I believe it was, to choose. And he chose the other band, and the name of which now escapes me, but
exactly.
Instead of the Beatles. And so it's really not Dick's fault.
When you discovered the Kinks, did you immediately know, this is a band that's going to sort of change things for you, for music, or was it?
No,
I kind of off at that point.
That would be completely wrong if I said I knew that. Of course, I didn't know that, but what I heard on the demo that I first listened to was songs I thought were really good. So I said, yes, I'm very interested. I will take him in and get him a deal. So that's when I brought him into Pie. And the first couple of records are things that Pie insisted that I did, that we did not want to do. And so there's the first 4 tracks are really, they're recorded nicely, but they didn't make any noise, which is what we expected, which is when Ray and I got together and he came up with You Really Got Me. I said, now that is different. I think that's a hit. And so we went from there.
Yeah. Now, You've been asked, and I'm not going to make you reiterate that
Jimmy Page. No,
I'm not going to make you reiterate that Jimmy Page did not play the solo.
No, he did not
play the solo.
No.
He did play the rhythm guitar on it. I've seen you say because Ray did not want to be playing the rhythm guitar and singing at the same time, and you were recording it live.
That's correct. Yes.
Is he playing it throughout, or is it just sort of in the part where Dave is soloing?
No, he was playing rhythm guitar throughout the track. I mean, mainly I hired him for the LP, and we did, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 tracks, whatever it was. He played rhythm guitar and all those because Ray wanted, I said, concentrate on his singing.
And was there a great sort of aha moment when Dave got that sound to come out of that amplifier?
It wound up being that way, although by the time we started recording, I was used to it. I mean, Dave would encourage us to go buy the little pig nose amp and kick it, and things like that. So just apart from the cones that he sliced and stuff like that. So we got a nice growly sound, and I did actually chain that to an AC30. So I had an option of, to really increase the level and all that kind of thing.
Were you aware of how groundbreaking that sound in itself was at the time?
Not really. I mean, I knew we had something different, but did I anticipate what happens? I think the answer is no. And the answer would be, it's what I hoped would happen. And the way that it turned out, yes, that was great.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you could look back and you say, wow, this was a turning point in rock history. But, 1964, 65, like you don't know that there's going to be a rock history. There hasn't been that much rock in the first place.
And I never said it was going to be a turning point. I, like you have heard later on, how much of a turning point it was. And that you really got me, we played forever and all that kind of stuff, and which of course pleases the hell out of me. But anticipating it, no, there's no way to anticipate that, and even less so these days, I think.
It seemed like Ray Davies had there were these kind of paired singles, and it would sort of make sense with the pattern of you had a hit, so come up with a follow-up. So he has You Really Got Me, and then there's All Day and All of the Night. And then you're like Tired of Waiting and Set Me Free, which I consider kind of a pair, or Well-Respected Man and Dedicated Follower of Fashion, or
those two, certainly. The last two are a pair. Yeah, no question of that. The initial situation back in the 60s is that the labels insisted that whatever the follow-up was to a hit, that it had some elements of it in the follow-up. So All Day and All the Night had some of the same sounds that I used for You Really Got Me.
How involved were you at the time in sort of arranging those songs? Like how much of it was the band came in and played it, and how much of it was you saying, okay, this is what you guys should do?
No, I did all the arrangements.
So what did they come to you with then?
They came to me with demos, or I heard Ray would, who was very prolific, as I'm sure you know, is to come in and I'd sit down with him at the piano usually, and he'd play me the stuff he just written. At which point I'd say, that needs more work. Let's put that one on hold and let's do this one immediately. So, which is, things like Sunny Afternoon. I think I heard like 6 bars. I say, yeah, okay, that's our next single.
Right.
It was that easy to suss out. I consider myself a hands-on producer, meaning that I really am there throughout the entire process, from finding the artist all the way through to mastering, and arranging is part of it, as far as I'm concerned. So,
and you produced all those albums through Something Else by the Kinks, which is, a great album. Face to Face before that is a great album. Did your role change over those albums, or was it pretty much a similar dynamic throughout?
No, I think it was a similar dynamic for all the stuff I did. The reason why I stopped recording is my contract ran out, and Ray wanted to, be the producer. That's fine. I had, a 3-4 year run, whatever it was, however long it took to do all those things. My role, I figured, was pretty much the same. I had a routine going with Ray where I listened to his songs, and we'd choose between us, what would you really like to do, and going to do the session. Before that, I always rehearsed the band first and worked out arrangements, then we go in and do them. And I don't think my role changed throughout the time I worked with them like that.
Was the use of session musicians consistent throughout, or were there more sort of on those early recordings and later it was pretty much the band with maybe Nicky Hopkins on the harpsichord or something like that?
Early on, I used Bobby Graham as the drummer because I did not have a drummer. Avery was not the drummer at that point. He didn't have a drummer. I used Bobby Graham. Okay. And Bobby Graham was on the first album, of course. And I had John Lord playing organ. And who else did I have? I think I had Perry Ford playing piano. And Nicky Hopkins, who I was turned on to by somebody. And he was just a kid at the time. And I heard him. I thought, this is some of the best piano playing I've ever heard. And I subsequently started using him exclusively as a keyboard player and introduced him around. And of course, he wound up playing for practically everybody.
Right.
But generally speaking, no. Apart from the very early on stuff, it was just the Kinks themselves playing.
Right. How did Nicky Hopkins or you react when Ray came in with the song "Session Man," which is kind of funny because you got Nicky Hopkins all over it, and then Ray's singing about the Session Man.
Yeah, I think maybe we laughed.
In terms of personalities, how did the Kinks compare sort of in how they got along to the Who, whom you started working with after you started with the Kinks?
All right, well, the difference between the two, and I got on with both bands extremely well, was who was managing them. I got on very well with the Kinks managers. Kit Lambert was one of the worst people I've ever met my entire life as the manager of the Who. And right. Chris Stamp never said a word, so I don't even, in the whole time I did the Who, I think maybe we exchanged about 5 words. So I got, I got no comments even to make about him. But Lambert was garbage. Sorry. Maybe Scum is even better.
Well, you ended up you did the first album. You did a bunch of the first singles, including My Generation and Kids Are All Right.
Right.
And then you had a whatever with him and
well, I got a letter in the mail saying your contract is null and void, which I took as a ridiculous notion because I made damn sure my contract would be valid. And so I had to wind up suing them. Of course, I won. But I was unable to continue producing the Who, which is a great shame. I did. By the way, I never did anything with the Who but hits.
Right. Well, and you owned that first album for a long time too, right? I mean, I think.
Yes. Oh yeah. No. I spent my money. Damn right I did. And various other tracks that I did. I paid for everything. And eventually, I sold them on, but that's yes, I owned them.
So when the Who started working with you, Pete Townsend had been influenced by your work with the Kinks, and I'd read that he'd written "Can't Explain" or "I Can't Explain" because he wanted to write something that sounded like the Kinks, so you would want to produce them.
That is a story I've heard also, and he has acknowledged it.
What did they sound like when you first got together with them? I know they were doing a lot of R&B covers at that time, like a lot of British bands were.
Oh no, they were great. I was asked to go see them. They were playing at a church hall, and I remember walking in. It was this vast church hall, echoey and all that kind of stuff, and they were on whatever stage that was there because of a big church. And the first thing I heard was "I'm a Man," that Daltrey sang, and and I said again, it was not, like 8 bars later. I said, "Yes, I'll sign you." It was that simple.
So you get them in the studio, and was it a similar thing where you were sort of arranging arranging those first singles,
absolutely,
bringing in other musicians also?
Mainly with the Who. The only thing I really did that I know pissed them off was had the Ivy League do the backing vocals on I Can't Explain, because at that point they were not doing backing vocals, and they got so incensed that they went out and learned to do backing vocals, which they did from that point on.
Right. So did they not envision the sort of call and response thing, or were they just doing it badly?
They really had no knowledge of how to do them. So yes, I guess doing it badly is probably the best way to put it.
What was the mood of a Who session like versus the mood of a Kinks session?
The mood of all the sessions I did were I tried to keep everything pretty much on an even keel and the same. I never told anybody any lies. I told them what I was going to do, how I was going to go about doing it, including rehearsing, working out arrangements, and I did that with every band I've ever done. So the mood was pretty much the same. This is, of course, if you're including the fact that the people I was working with were reasonable, I should say. And for the most part, they were. There's only one band ever that I actually walked out on because they were ridiculous. But everything...
Not a famous band.
Well, in their own minds, they were in Banjo Memorial. I can tell you, over there. They were jerks in the studio. I just said, "Hey, carry on. I'm out of here."
After you stopped working with like the Kinks and the Who, did you listen to their next works and think, "Oh, I would have done this differently, or I would have approached it in this certain way that they're not doing"?
I wouldn't be human if I didn't do that. Of course I did that. And of course I thought I could do it better. I think the thing I have to say is a whole lot of people agree with what I thought. So the thing is I created, I guess, that's what I'm credited with, creating the sound for both the Who and the Kinks. And once you do that, and then they go off and do their own thing, it's not the same. So I'm more in favor of the things that people really liked, which I egomaniacally think has a lot to do with me. So, yes, I liked what I did, probably more than I liked what anybody else did afterwards.
Well, yeah, I mean, the next Kinks album was The Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society, which a lot of people love those songs, but it was an album that didn't have any hits on it at all, and the sound of it is pretty muffled as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you've probably heard those songs, whether you would have thought, "Oh, this should have been the single, and this is what they should have done with it."
Oh, I had all those thoughts and how they should have been recorded and what they should have sounded like. Yes. It was I thought a 3 or 4 steps down sound-wise from all the stuff I'd done with them. Right.
Who's Next was probably the first one that sounded like a modern band, and that was 1971 with Glenn Johns, who I think had engineered some stuff you'd done as well. He
did a whole lot of stuff for me because he was a terrific engineer, and that I didn't. The fact that I didn't have to. Once he knew what I wanted, he gave me what I wanted, rather than me having to, keep talking about it. So, he's an excellent engineer. He became a good producer. Originally, he just was doing engineering. When he started producing, he obviously did some, terrific things.
Well, so the Who and the Kinks, so they both have this, aggressive, guitar sound. They both have these visionary songwriters. You have Ray Davis and Pete Townsend, and they both had a lot of big personalities. Were you working mostly with, like Ray and Pete was it sort of, did they feel like, were they both kind of communal efforts once you got in the studio, or what was the dynamic like for you?
Okay, well, first of all, easy for me to say that they were two of the best songwriters of the rock era ever. I was fortunate to have both of them. I lucked out. I was very friendly with pretty much everybody in the band. Mooney was one of my favorite people. He was funny. He was obviously wild as hell, but he was, I still think he was the best rock drummer of all time. And same with all the guys in the band. Pete Quaife and with the Kinks and in fact, all the guys I was pretty much friendly with throughout, and I'm still friendly with Pete, and Ray and I don't communicate, but that's okay.
Was there a special power when the Who was playing? Like, was that kind of like a more of a visceral experience? Just, I mean, obviously the Kinks had a lot of power too, but the Who seemed like they were sort of explosive on a new level as far as rock at that time.
I think that's accurate. Yeah, there's no question that Pete's guitar playing was extraordinary, and that he certainly broke a whole lot of ground with what we wound up recording. And I mean, I think I can add Eddie Phillips to that in
The Creation,
because he's the other one that really broke a whole lot of ground.
They were the next ones I was going to ask you about. Yeah. Like when you discovered The Creation and The Creation, you signed to your own label, right?
I did.
Did you think, oh, this is, like sort of the third in this triumvirate of great British bands at that time?
I absolutely thought that. And it's one of my biggest regrets ever that I had just made a deal with Ahmet Ertegun at Atlantic for them to be taken by Ahmet in Atlantic. And he certainly, in my opinion, would have made them superstars. And they broke up, and I could not keep them together. I tried my best. But they apparently wound up hating each other and had no interest in staying together, even for a great deal.
Right. I mean, you had Kenny Pickett, who was the lead singer, and he left pretty early on, and he was...
And he came back, and he came back and forth a couple of different times, yeah.
Right. Yeah, he was gone, and then he came back, and then you had some really good songs while he was gone, like How Does It Feel to Feel? But you probably didn't
Bob
get that.
Garner. Bob Garner, who wrote some great songs, yes, no question. And
then you had Eddie Phillips, who he basically invented sort of bowing the guitar. I associate that with Painter Man. I don't know if he did it before then.
He did it on Baking Time.
Right, on that too.
That's the first one. And Eddie was extraordinary. He invented that. He also, I still think, is one of the most underrated guitarists in rock. He was a brilliant guitarist. He could play anything, and pretty much did during the time we did The Creation.
Making Time is one of those songs that it's like in every other movie now. I remember the first time hearing it in something in Rushmore, where Wes Anderson has fantastic taste in it, but it starts that movie. And he always pulls out some, good old, less, known Kinks songs too. But I've heard Making Time, and I think I heard it in an ad. I've heard it in a lot of stuff. So
it's been licensed and for a whole bunch of, and for a lot of commercials, by the way.
Right. So in that case, you as the producer, part of your job was just like, come on, guys, keep together so we can actually get this going.
With Creation?
Yeah.
Early on, I didn't have that problem. It was mainly the two songers were Kenny and Eddie, and they came up with great stuff and looked like it was going to roll on. And of course, we had various people, came in and out. Ronnie Woods, I think, was there for a while, and we had changes of personnel from time to time. But the core people were there, and then they started coming in and out. And we got to the point where I said, they just made this great deal, and it was finito. They're gone. So,
did you think those earlier songs would have been bigger hits like in the US?
if they'd had Atlantic initially, I'm sure they would have been bigger hits. Yeah. That not the way it worked out, obviously.
Right. And then you worked a little bit with the Easybeats, enough to give them by far their biggest, most well-known hit, which was Friday on My Mind. And then you had another sort of producer manager issue with someone from that band.
Ted Albert was probably second only to Lambert in terms of being garbage. He brought basically he was jealous as hell. He brought the band over to England and started in just some sides with them. And they had a deal with UA, and UA thought that the sides were so horrible they removed them as the producer. And that's how I wound up with them. Their actual manager was Mike Vaughn, actually came to me and said, "Would you be interested in hearing the band?" I said, "Yeah, of course. I know who they were." And so we went from there. So Albert never forgave the fact that I replaced him as producer.
How many songs did you record with them?
I did 2 albums with him. I think there's 2 albums, yeah. I did one album for sure. I think there are 2.
So the Easybeats were from Australia. They came over to England. You're in England. Right. Was Friday on My Mind like one of the first songs you cut with them?
The backstory in that is they came over. I said, yes, I'm very interested. And I did not like any of the songs they played me that they thought should be the first things to record. I said, what I'd like for you guys to do is go to your flat and sit down and write stuff and come to the office once a week and play me what you've done. And this went on for 6 weeks, and I kept saying, sorry, no, it's not really the right song. So week number 6, they came in. First thing they played was Friday in My Mind. I said, that's it. We're going to do a session like day after tomorrow. So it was obvious to me that was a hit.
That song has such urgency to it. There's like a lot of energy. It's a really fast, powerful song. Did it sound like that when they demoed it for you, or were you like, let's pick it up?
Well, no, because they were sitting around my office. Certainly not. But what I heard, I knew immediately what I could do from a recording point of view. So that's in fact what I wound up doing. No, but the song and the way they started the intro and all the rest of the stuff. I immediately heard how to record it. It's just it seemed obvious, that the record you hear is what I think I heard almost immediately.
There's definitely a Shel Talmy sound to all these bands and recordings we're talking about. How would you describe that sound?
I'm not sure. People have told me I have a sound. I guess I do. The best thing I can tell you about how I do a record is that, starting as an engineer really helped me. I got a chance to record all the Wrecking Crew as an engineer. And so I understood what really great musicians are like. And then, of course, I did all my experimenting with miking and all that kind of stuff. And I evolved a way of what I really like to hear in terms of how drums should sound and how guitar should sound and all that kind of thing. And I'm very persistent in the sound I want to get when I do a record. All those instruments have to sound right to me in order to say, yes, okay, I'm now satisfied. And of course, the last bit of it is, last 2 bits really are mixing and mastering. And, mixing, which I love to do. And that's why I've been taking on mixing jobs since the pandemic, is is put all those elements together and make them sound like they belong to each other. I think maybe that's the best way to describe it.
Right. I actually spoke with Bernie Grunman for this as well, and talked about like the mastering side of it, and just sort of really got into just sort of what that actually is, because there's so much more to it than people understand in terms of just trying to make it sound like, like you have the mix, right, and then you just want to make that mix sound as good as you can without sort of changing the nature of what the mix is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, I'll go back to the fact that being an engineer was really enormously helpful. Besides the fact that I have I don't know if you want to call it knack or talent or something. I hear frequencies. I can always, if I'm mixing, and I can tell the engineer exactly what frequencies I want to hear. And so if that's part of my sound, that's probably what people are talking about.
When you were working back then, were you listening to sort of the other big albums coming out at the time and kind of taking notes of like, like when the Beatles records would come out, and, you'd think about what George Martin was doing and with those and how those sounded, and, taking any notes from those? Or were you thinking, nah, that's not what I want to be doing? Or, the Stones albums, which sounded, different.
I don't think it's as cut and dry to that. I listened to all the records that came out, some of which I like better than others. And I question you're asking, did I accept or reject things I heard that I would then use? I don't have an answer for that. I don't think so, but I don't really know. Probably some of it I absorbed and thought was cool, and I probably used it on things I did. I can't even answer that. I don't know.
Were there albums coming out around then or other times where you would listen and go, wow, that is a fantastically produced record?
Yeah, mainly I would do that with individual songs rather than with entire albums. And I think I still do that. I think it's almost impossible to do a whole album full of things that every song is brilliant. And I still feel the same way about it. But I do take note of, well-produced songs and also voices. I'm very into both male and female great voices, and there's a bunch of them, and they're my favorite things, and I still listen to them today.
So, like, what are those wonderfully produced songs that you're thinking of, or some of those voices?
Oh, the voices of I love voices where they're singing on key, they're singing with passion, they're singing with phrasing. I get to, let's see, Emmylou Harris, Olivia Newton-John, Whitney Houston. You
also worked with David Bowie early on when he was Davy Jones.
Yeah, certainly did.
Is he someone you kept in touch with over the years?
I did, yes, all pretty much up to the time he died, yeah.
What struck you the most about his sort of approach to music?
Well, he was brought to my office when he was 17 years old by a friend of mine, and I immediately liked him. He was brash like I was when I first arrived, and I thought he was very smart. I liked the way he sounded. I liked what he was writing, and I really thought that the stuff I did with him were going to be hits. Unfortunately, the market didn't agree. Took him the market about 5 or 6 years to really catch on to what he was doing. And so the things I did are, still sound great, but they were not hits when we first did them.
How much did you record with him? I think I'd read somewhere that you had sort of an archive of material with him, although I think that was released finally.
Some of that's been released. So what the current thing you probably heard is that I have actually 8 Bowie tracks that I did that nobody's ever heard. And we're in the process of negotiating releases for them.
So this is stuff that you own and you're negotiating with people to put it out.
Right.
When's that going to happen? And what is it?
Who knows what is going to happen? I mean, it depends on the the whole market's gone crazy with NFTs and with the latest thing in that line, which is the DAO, which is Decentralized Autonomous Organization, which nobody knows what the hell that means. And it's kind of like Bitcoin. It's going, up and down like a barmaid's drawers, as they say. So I don't know. We're exploring it, and I'm obviously looking for the best possible situation that would make me money and would enhance Bowie's reputation, which he probably doesn't need enhancing, but I'd still like to see it happen.
Have you just been holding on to these, waiting for the right moment, or like how have these not been released already?
Mainly because I didn't want to release them. There was no point at that. They were different from the things he did later on, and at some point I thought I was going to release them, and then when all this stuff started happening about releasing things that nobody ever heard, and the NFTs, and it started to make sense. So that's why I got involved in it.
So what do these sound like?
They sound great.
Are they like sort of full like band recordings as opposed to solo acoustic or anything?
No, I've got full band recordings.
Who's the
band? Lower Third or Managed Boys, one of the two. I can't remember which. And a couple of those occasions I got other musicians in.
Well, I'll be eager to hear those, and I know other people will be as well. And there's a whole series of releases that have the name or the subtitle From the Shel Talmy Vaults. You got Planet Mod and Planet Beat and Shel's Girls.
Yes, my archivist, who's also my historian, who's Alec Palau, is very involved in that. He has a relationship with Ace, who is the ones that have been putting these things out. And he's done a hell of a job and getting them together. Yes, I'm pleased that they've been unearthed and have been released.
Do you go back and listen to this stuff, and do you ever get sort of surprises when you go back and you go, oh wow, that was better than I remembered it, or that was different than I remembered it? Absolutely,
I definitely do that, and I definitely am surprised at how good some of this stuff is. Actually, I'm about to receive a whole bunch of CDs that Alec has made for me of things that in some cases I haven't heard in about 30 or 40 years. So I'm looking forward to that. That should be fun.
Are there any albums or singles you look back on and you think, well, that's the greatest thing I ever worked on?
Oh, I've got several things that I did that I think should have been hits. In fact, I even made a CD of them that weren't hits. That I was positive were going to be. I mean, I can tell you one. I had a hit with Chris White with the Spanish Wine, and he did a song called "Don't Look Down," which was going to be the follow-up. It was a follow-up. I thought it was going to be a smash. It wasn't. I still think it's a terrific song and an excellent record. I say so myself, but that was because Chris was that good.
When was that recorded?
Oh, God, we're talking about 1970 something. 73, 74.
This is not the Chris White who is in the Zombies?
No, not Chris White in the Zombies.
Different Chris.
Yeah. No, look up Spanish Wine. It was the hit I had, and that's still out there.
Well, I would love to hear some of that stuff too. Yeah, I'll have to go back and check all that out.
Another thing, I was a huge fan of Dickie Brown, who was the numero uno backing singer, but she could sing her butt off regardless. In other words, a great voice. I did an album with her that on the day of release, the company went bankrupt.
The music business today versus the music business back when you started, like which has more problems?
Well, the major difference, I think a lot of people who've been around as long as I have, or even not as long as I have, will agree, is that the music business then was staffed by music people. today, for the most part, is staffed by bean counters who know nothing about music and are only interested in the bottom line. I find that's the major difference.
Right. But you still haven't been paid for Friday on My Mind.
God, no. Albert went back to Australia. I'm in London, and basically said, "Sue me." I said, yeah, right. I'm sitting in London. You're several thousand miles away in Australia. Who's going to win? Besides the fact that it had to be adjudicated there, and Daddy was the owner of the major publishing company, so I had a snowball's chance in hell of collecting anything, so I didn't bother.
So different kind of crooks in different eras, I guess.
Different kind of crooks. Crooks are all the same, I think. I mean, I can name you a whole bunch, but I probably won't. Maybe in terms of how they threaten people early on. They were more likely to threaten bodily harm than they did later on. But bottom line is they all stole. That's what it comes down to.
When you listen to music at home, how do you listen to it? Do you put on records, CDs?
No, I've got both Alexa and Google Home. They both also have they both have Spotify, and Google Home has YouTube, obviously, that they own. And so between them, I can get practically everything I've ever done.
There you go. Which Kinks album do you like more, Face to Face or something else?
Yeah, Face to Face has got some great songs on it. I think it edges it out by a little bit. In fact, I've been doing songs out of Face to Face recently. There's some really good stuff there.
Yeah, you talked about Party Line and how you guys wanted sound effects between every song on that record, but they wouldn't let you do it. So we only got it on a couple of them.
Yeah, they wouldn't go for it.
And also that the cover looked more psychedelic than the record was.
Yeah, also true. But then again, that's dealing with record labels, which any of us that have to or have had to deal with record labels will confirm everything I'm saying is accurate.
See, and then right after Sunny Afternoon, I think you had Dead End Street and Big Black Smoke, which is and Dead End Street you hear, and it's another one. It's another one where it kind of takes that sound, but it's another great song. And I'm like, I don't know why that one wasn't a big hit too.
And it actually was a hit. It wasn't a big hit. It should have been a much bigger hit, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm just trying to think if there's any last secrets of the business you want to share that you haven't shared with anyone else.
I think that good records are certainly in the hands of the people producing the records and the people and the artists, which is pretty obvious. But still in all, that's what it really comes down to. I don't think there's any magic formula or there's no secrets. If you're recording somebody with a great voice, then it's a great voice. If they're not a great voice, yes, it could be corrected today because of digital, but that's not a lot of fun to do. And there are some artists out there that I'm sure you know who they are that would have no career if there wasn't Melodyne to correct their pitch.
Right. Who was the last song or artist who really knocked you out?
Good question. I don't think I've really thought about that. I said I'm a huge fan of Emmylou Harris, and anything she could sing the songbook or the telephone book. Same thing. Ray Charles another one who could sing the telephone book, and it would still be a hit, and they still sound great. So those certainly are two, and there are several others who could probably come very close to doing that.
All right. Thank you so much, Shel Talmy. It's really a pleasure to talk to you. And it's been, a real pleasure to listen to all the music that you've produced over the years. And it's really just a lot of the favorite stuff in my record and CD collection, because I have copies in both formats. And then I could have Alexa play them too. So, so great talking to you. And thanks so much. And we'll follow up when you get that Bowie stuff out.
Good. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
That's it for episode 13 of Caropop. Thanks to Shel Talmy for all of the great memories, stories, and insights into making of some of rock's most indelible records. You could read more of his remembrances on his Facebook page, and the albums he produced remain widely available. Maybe start with the Kinks Face to Face and go from there. Please return for episode 14 next Thursday as we get back to one of our favorite topics with someone who was there. Thanks, as always, to web developer Marty Rosenbaum and to Lou Carlozo, who recorded the Caropop theme. Caropop is produced by Chris Swake, who also has great ears. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow me on Twitter at Mark Caro, at MarkCaro, and visit the Caropop website, caropop.com, for posts about music, movies, and food, and also this Caropop podcast. Thanks.